The day I buried my husband. His mother pointed at the church door and said, "Take your son and leave. You were never part of this family." I thought losing my husband would be the hardest moment of my life. I was wrong. Because the greatest heartbreak was watching my 7-year-old son hear those words. But before I tell you what happened next, if you love emotional revenge stories, shocking family secrets, and unforgettable endings, make sure you subscribe to Bloodline Revenge Stories, like this video, and share it with someone who loves powerful stories. Your support helps us bring you a new story every week. Now, let me tell you how one letter changed everything. My name is Olivia Brooks. I'm 35 years old. And for 11 wonderful years, I was married to the love of my life, Michael Brooks. Michael wasn't born into an ordinary family. The Brooks family owned one of the largest construction companies in Illinois. Luxury homes, private jets, country clubs, everything money could buy. But if you had met Michael, you never would have guessed he came from billions. He still opened doors for strangers, still tipped waitresses generously, still stopped to help people with flat tires. Money never changed him. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with him. We met in the most ordinary place imaginable. A public library. I was studying for my teaching certification. Michael was reading a history book. He accidentally dropped a stack of books. I helped him pick them up. He smiled. "I owe you a coffee." I laughed.
These
"You
new
owe me about
regulations are
20
expected
books
to take
first."
effect immediately,
That tiny
impacting millions of
conversation
small
became our
businesses
first date.
nationwide. We
Then
will
our
continue to
second,
follow this story.
then
These new
forever.
regulations are
Not
expected to
everyone
take effect
celebrated our
immediately,
marriage,
impacting millions
especially
of small
Michael's
businesses
mother,
nationwide.
Margaret
We will
Brooks.
continue to follow this
The first
story.
time she
These new
met me,
regulations are
she
expected
looked
to
me
take
up and
effect
down,
immediately,
then
impacting
quietly
millions
asked
of small
Michael.
businesses
She's a
nationwide.
public school
We will
teacher.
continue to follow this story.
Michael
These new
proudly
regulations
answered,
are expected to take
"Yes."
effect immediately,
Margaret
impacting
smiled
millions of
politely,
small
but
businesses
her eyes
nationwide.
said something
We will continue
completely
to follow
different.
this story.
From
These
that
new
day
regulations
forward,
are expected to
she
take
never
effect
truly
immediately,
accepted me.
impacting
Every
millions of
family
small
dinner
businesses
felt like an
nationwide.
interview.
We will continue
Margaret
to
would
follow this
ask,
story.
"So,
These new regulations
Olivia,
are expected to take effect
do teachers
immediately,
really make enough
impacting
to
millions
support
of small
themselves?
businesses nationwide.
Or,
We will continue
it
to
must be
follow this
nice
story.
marrying into
These new
security."
regulations are expected to take
The
effect
comments were
immediately,
always polite
impacting
enough
millions of small
that
businesses
no one else
nationwide.
noticed.
We will
But
continue
they
to follow
always
this
carried
story.
the same
These new
message.
regulations are
"You don't
expected to
belong
take effect
here."
immediately,
Michael defended
impacting
me
millions
every
of small
single
businesses
time.
nationwide.
"Mom,
We will continue to
I
follow
married
this story.
Olivia because
These
I
new
love her.
regulations are expected to take
Not
effect
because of her
immediately,
bank account."
impacting millions of small
Margaret would
businesses
simply
nationwide.
change the subject.
We will continue to follow
Then,
this story.
7
These new
years
regulations
after
are
our
expected
wedding,
to take
our
effect
son Noah
immediately,
was born.
impacting millions of
Holding
small
him for the
businesses
first time,
nationwide. We
Michael
will continue to
cried.
follow this story.
"I've built
These new
buildings my
regulations are
entire
expected to
life.
take effect
But
immediately,
this little
impacting
boy,
millions of small
he's the
businesses
greatest thing
nationwide.
I'll ever
We will
build."
continue to follow this story.
From that
These
day
new
forward,
regulations are expected
Noah
to take
became
effect
the center of our
immediately,
world.
impacting millions
Every
of small
Saturday,
businesses
Michael
nationwide.
took him to
We will
the park.
continue to follow this
Every
story.
Sunday,
These new
they
regulations are
built
expected to
model
take
airplanes
effect
together.
immediately,
No
impacting
matter how
millions of
busy
small
work
businesses
became,
nationwide.
family
We will
always
continue to
came
follow this
first.
story.
Then,
These new regulations are
everything
expected to
changed
take
on a
effect
rainy
immediately,
Thursday morning.
impacting millions
Michael
of small
left early
businesses
for a meeting in
nationwide.
St.
We will
Louis.
continue to follow
Before
this story.
leaving,
These new
he kissed
regulations
Noah
are
on the
expected to take
forehead,
effect
then
immediately,
hugged me
impacting
tightly.
millions of
"I'll be
small
home
businesses
tonight."
nationwide.
I
We will
smiled.
continue to follow this
"I'll
story.
make your
These new
favorite
regulations
lasagna."
are expected to take
He
effect
laughed.
immediately,
"Now I
impacting
definitely
millions
have
of
to
small
hurry back."
businesses nationwide.
Those
We
were
will
the last
continue to
words
follow
I
this
ever
story.
heard him
These
say.
new regulations
At
are expected to take
11:43
effect
that morning,
immediately,
my
impacting
phone
millions
rang.
of small businesses
Unknown number.
nationwide. We will
Mrs.
continue to
Brooks.
follow this story.
"Yes.
These new regulations are
This is
expected to take
Officer
effect
Daniel
immediately,
Harris.
impacting
There
millions
has
of
been
small
an
businesses
accident.
nationwide.
My
We will
knees
continue
gave
to follow
out
this
before he
story.
finished
These new
speaking.
regulations are
The room
expected to take
started
effect
spinning.
immediately,
I remember
impacting
hearing
millions
Noah
of small
playing
businesses
upstairs,
nationwide.
completely
We will continue to
unaware
follow this story.
that his
These new
entire world
regulations
had
are
just
expected to
changed
take
forever.
effect immediately,
The funeral took
impacting
place
millions
5
of
days
small
later.
businesses nationwide.
Hundreds of people
We will continue to
attended.
follow this story.
Business
These new
leaders,
regulations are expected to take
politicians,
effect immediately,
friends,
impacting
employees.
millions of small businesses
Michael had
nationwide.
touched more
We will
lives than
continue
I
to
ever
follow this
realized.
story. These new
Noah
regulations
stood
are
beside
expected
me,
to take effect
holding my
immediately,
hand so
impacting
tightly.
millions of
His
small
little
businesses
fingers turned
nationwide.
white.
We will
He
continue to follow
whispered,
this story.
"Mom,
These new regulations are
is Daddy
expected to take
really in
effect
there?"
immediately,
I knelt
impacting millions
beside
of
him,
small businesses
fighting back
nationwide.
tears.
We will continue to
"No,
follow this story.
sweetheart.
These new regulations are
That's just
expected to
his
take
body.
effect immediately,
His love
impacting
will
millions
always
of
be
small
with us."
businesses nationwide.
Noah
We will
nodded,
continue to follow this
trying so
story.
hard
These
to be
new
brave.
regulations are expected
After
to
the
take effect
service,
immediately,
people lined
impacting
up to
millions
offer
of small businesses
condolences.
nationwide.
Then
We
Margaret
will continue to
approached
follow
us.
this story.
She wasn't
These new
crying.
regulations are
She
expected to
wasn't
take
even
effect
looking at me.
immediately,
She
impacting
stared
millions of
directly
small
at
businesses
Noah,
nationwide.
then finally
We will
turned
continue to
toward
follow
me.
this story.
Her
These
voice
new
was
regulations
cold,
are expected to take
almost
effect
emotionless.
immediately,
I
impacting
think it's
millions of
time.
small businesses
I
nationwide.
frowned.
We will
Time
continue to
for
follow
what?
this story.
She looked around to make sure everyone could hear. For you to stop pretending. The church fell silent. Guests stopped talking. Margaret took one step closer. "I always knew why you married my son." I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" She folded her arms. "The money. The Brooks name. The lifestyle. I warned Michael. But he refused to listen." I couldn't believe this was happening. "Not today. Not here. Not in front of our son." I whispered, "Margaret. This is Michael's funeral." She didn't care. She pointed toward the church entrance. "You got what you wanted. So take your son. And leave this family." The words echoed through the sanctuary. Noah looked up at me. His little voice trembled. "Mom. What does she mean?" My heart shattered. Before I could answer, Michael's younger brother, Andrew, stepped forward. "Mom. Enough." But Margaret raised her hand. "No. Everyone deserves to know the truth." She looked directly at the guests. "She's nothing but a gold digger." Several people gasped. Others looked away in embarrassment. No one knew what to say. I felt hundreds of eyes on me. Yet the only face I could see was Noah's. Confused, scared, and trying to understand why his grandmother hated his mother. I took a deep breath, picked up Michael's framed photograph from beside the flowers, held Noah's hand, and quietly said, "Come on, sweetheart. We're going home." We walked toward the church doors. Not because Margaret had one, but because I refused to let Michael's funeral become a battlefield. As we reached the parking lot, a black luxury sedan pulled into the church driveway. An elderly man stepped out, carrying a worn brown leather briefcase. He looked around urgently, then asked one of the ushers, "Has the Brooks family left yet?" "No. They're still inside." The man nodded. "Good. I've been instructed to deliver Michael Brooks' final letter. To the entire family." I stopped walking. Margaret froze. No one knew that the envelope inside that briefcase was about to expose a truth Michael had kept hidden from everyone. The church parking lot fell completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Even the wind seemed to disappear. The elderly man adjusted his glasses, looked at the family, and spoke calmly. "My name is James Collins. I've been Michael Brooks' personal attorney for nearly 20 years. He gently raised the brown leather briefcase. "And before his passing, Michael gave me very specific instructions." Margaret crossed her arms impatiently. "This can wait." James shook his head. "I'm afraid it can't." He made it very clear. "Read my final letter immediately after my funeral, with every member of my family present. No exceptions. No delays. No excuses. Within minutes, everyone gathered inside one of the church's private meeting rooms. The atmosphere was heavy. No one spoke. Margaret sat confidently at the head of the table. Andrew sat beside her. Several relatives whispered quietly. I chose a chair near the back. Noah leaned against my shoulder, still holding my hand. He looked exhausted. Children should never have to experience days like this. James carefully placed the envelope on the table. Its seal was untouched. Across the front, Michael's handwriting read, "To everyone I love." James looked around the room. "Before I open this, I need everyone to understand something. This is not my opinion. These are Michael's exact words. He broke the seal, removed several handwritten pages, then began reading. If you're hearing this, it means I'm no longer with you. The room instantly became emotional. Even Andrew lowered his head. James continued. First, I want to thank every employee who helped build Brooks Construction. You gave me more than a successful company. You gave me a purpose. He turned another page, then smiled sadly. To my son, Noah. If you're old enough to understand this one day, always remember, being kind will take you further than being rich. I looked at Noah. He didn't fully understand, but he smiled when he heard his father's name. James turned another page. His expression suddenly changed. He looked toward Margaret, then quietly continued reading. Now, there is something I should have said years ago. The room became completely silent. Mom, if you're listening, please don't interrupt. Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair. James continued. For 11 years. You've believed Olivia married me for money. You're wrong. Margaret immediately stood up. That's enough. James calmly raised his hand. Mrs. Brooks. Your son specifically instructed me to finish reading. Reluctantly, she sat back down, but the confidence on her face had disappeared. James looked down again. His voice grew firmer. The truth is, Olivia had no idea how wealthy our family really was. Several relatives exchanged confused looks. James continued. During our first 2 years together, she believed I was an ordinary architect. Gasps filled the room. Even Andrew looked surprised. I quietly nodded. It was true. When Michael and I met, he drove a used pickup truck, lived in a modest apartment, and rarely mentioned his family's fortune. I didn't discover the truth until after we were engaged. James read on. The day Olivia learned who I really was, she tried to return my engagement ring. Margaret's eyes widened. James continued reading. She told me, I don't want anyone thinking I married you because you're rich. The room became silent again. That conversation had happened 11 years ago, just between Michael and me. No one else had ever known. Then came the sentence. That changed everything. James slowly looked toward Margaret, then read Michael's exact words. Mom, the only person who ever cared about my money was never Olivia. He paused. The room held its breath, then finished the sentence. It was you. Margaret's face turned pale. James continued. You spent years trying to protect our fortune, while Olivia spent years protecting my heart. No one moved. No one even blinked. The silence was overwhelming. Michael's words continued. Every birthday, every anniversary, every Christmas, Olivia asked me to spend less on gifts and more time with family. James smiled gently. She reminded me that memories become priceless long after money loses its value. Tears rolled down my face. Those were conversations only Michael and I had shared. Hearing them again felt like hearing his voice one last time. Then James reached the final page. I believe this next section is why Michael insisted the letter be read today. Everyone looked up. Margaret leaned forward nervously. James adjusted his glasses, then quietly said, There is one final truth about the Brooks family that none of you know. My heart started racing. Andrew looked confused. The room became completely still. James unfolded the last page, took a slow breath, and whispered, I never inherited Brooks Construction. I built it. But legally, it has belonged to someone else all along. Every face in the room froze. No one in the room moved. Margaret stared at James Collins. Read it. Her voice trembled. James unfolded the final page, looked around the room, then continued reading Michael's words. If you've reached this part, then it's time for everyone to know the truth. Legally, Brooks Construction was never entirely mine. Confused whispers spread across the room. Margaret frowned. What does that mean? James raised his hand. The letter will answer that. He continued. 10 years ago, when our company nearly went bankrupt, I wanted to sell everything. I wanted to give up. But one person refused to let me quit. Everyone looked at me. I slowly shook my head. I had no idea what Michael was talking about. James continued reading. Olivia quietly sold the only thing she had inherited from her parents. Her family's lake house. Gasps filled the room. Andrew looked at me. You sold your inheritance. I lowered my eyes. I had never told anyone. Not even Noah. Michael's words continued. She sold it without asking for recognition. Without asking for ownership. Without asking for her name on a single document. She simply handed me the money. And said. James paused. Then smiled sadly. Go save your employees. Tears rolled down my face. I remembered that night. Michael had been sitting alone in our kitchen. Bills covered the table. He believed hundreds of employees would lose their jobs. I couldn't let that happen. So I sold the only property my parents had left me. Not because I expected anything back. Because I loved him. James continued. That money kept Brooks Construction alive. It protected over 400 employees. It gave hundreds of families another paycheck. Everything this company became started with Olivia's sacrifice. The room fell completely silent. Margaret couldn't even look at me. Then came the final revelation. James carefully lifted a sealed legal document from the briefcase. This accompanies Michael's letter. He placed it on the table. 10 years ago, after Olivia saved the company, Michael secretly amended the ownership agreement. Margaret frowned. What agreement? James opened the document. The agreement that made Olivia a 50% owner of Brooks Construction. The room exploded with disbelief. Andrew stood up. What? Margaret nearly dropped her purse. That's impossible. James calmly slid the signed papers across the table. These documents were properly executed and legally registered. Michael insisted they remain confidential unless he passed away first. Margaret looked at me in shock. You owned half the company. All these years. I nodded slowly. I didn't know. James confirmed it. She truly didn't. Michael never told her. He believed she would refuse. He wanted her to be protected. Even if he wasn't here. James turned to the final paragraph of Michael's letter. His voice grew emotional. Olivia. If you're hearing this, I'm sorry I never told you. I knew you'd say no. I knew you'd tell me to keep everything in my family's name. That's exactly why I couldn't. You gave me everything. Without ever asking for anything. Now it's my turn to take care of you. My vision blurred with tears. It felt as if Michael was sitting beside me, holding my hand one last time. Then James read Michael's final words. Mom. If you've spent years believing Olivia married me for money, remember this. She became wealthy the day she married me. Yet she chose to sacrifice her own inheritance. To save mine. That isn't what a gold digger does. That's what true love looks like. No one spoke. Even Margaret, the strongest voice in the room, had nothing left to say. Several moments passed. Then, to everyone's surprise, Margaret slowly stood, walked across the room, stopped in front of me. Tears streamed down her face. I'm so sorry. 4 years. I had imagined hearing those words. I thought they would make me feel victorious. Instead, they simply made me feel sad. Because Michael wasn't there to hear them. Margaret looked toward Noah. She knelt beside him. I failed your mother. I failed my son. I don't expect you to forgive me today. But I hope. One day. You'll let me earn it. Noah looked at me. I smiled gently. He stepped forward and hugged his grandmother. Children have a way of healing wounds that adults spend years creating. 6 months later, Brooks' construction looked different. Not because of new buildings. Because of new values. We started scholarship programs for employees' children. Created emergency funds for workers facing hardship. Improved healthcare benefits. Every major decision asked one simple question. What would Michael have wanted? Margaret changed too. She no longer measured people by their wealth. Every Friday, she volunteered at the community center where I taught reading classes. Not because anyone asked her to. Because she finally understood. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. One quiet evening, Noah and I visited Michael's grave. The sun was setting. Golden light covered the cemetery. Noah placed a small drawing beside the headstone. It showed our family holding hands. Dad. He whispered. Grandma is nicer now. I think you'd be happy. I smiled through my tears. I think he already knows. People often believe love is proven with expensive gifts, luxury homes, or giant bank accounts. Michael taught me something different. Real love is the sacrifice no one sees. The kindness no one applauds. The quiet decisions made behind closed doors. My in-laws thought I married Michael for his fortune. The truth was, I had already given away mine to protect his dream. And in the end, the greatest inheritance Michael left me wasn't half a company. It was the proof that he had always seen my heart. And that was worth more than all the wealth in the world.